Oops. Everything we do is a learning process. So I'm starting a series devoted to following up my videos, called Addendums. The purpose of these addendum videos will be to show you what I've learned, so that you might have an easier time than I did. As well, I want to use the addendums to address viewer comments and additions. We don't all know everything, so I'm grateful to see you guys add relevant information to help me and others in the future. Now, with that said, let's get into it. To mark out the circles, I used two methods. One ultimately quite a lot more effective and accessible than the other. Method 1 was the jerry-rigged compass. This was far from ideal, and in the end I made the circle a bit too big because as hard as I tried, I just couldn't make these tips line up quite properly, and it was never completely solid, and it didn't work out. They make tools that have a purpose for a purpose. However, method 2 was far more effective. I just put the Clickwheel onto the plastic I wanted to cut, and I traced the inner and outer circles with a Sharpie. With the second method, all you have to really do is make sure that there's no Sharpie left on the plastic after you're done cutting, and it should fit pretty fine. Of course, that's if you're using something thin enough for scissors to cut through. The Clickwheel, being as thick as it is, might need a little bit more. As for cutting, the outer circle should be pretty self-explanatory, just stay inside the line. However, the inner circle can be a lot more tough. I have these scissors that I got from a nail care kit. They're really small and they're curved. It's not something I've seen very much, so I ended up having to take little tiny chomps one at a time, and eventually it's pretty much the right size. If you don't have appropriate cutting tools like a Dremel or cutter or punch, all you have to do is just be slow and patient. Take tiny slivers off until you get to the end. Otherwise you risk overcutting, and the ring on this, it doesn't have that much space before it slips off. For the next portion of this, I'm going to talk about iFixit a little bit. I recommended iFixit as a good guide for taking apart the iPod, and some people might have disagreed. Personally, I like iFixit as a resource, but I feel like I might have the ability to extrapolate from missing information better than a lot of other people. So it might be just easier for me to show you guys instead of saying go here. I think iFixit's guides are generally pretty good, but their images are really inconsistent. They can be hit or miss. Now in the video, I opened this pod with my bare hands, somewhat like this. A few points. Firstly, this is a partially broken pod, so I'm not really going to damage anything that isn't already a bit broken. And secondly, while it's not an entirely incorrect way to open them, I understand that it's not the ideal way. There's other methods that can be a lot better for opening without potentially bending the sides of the case. One thing to make sure of is that you should always lock your pod before you try opening it. On the 4th gen, it doesn't matter if it's open because the lock switch is part of the headphone assembly. With the 3rd gen, the lock switch isn't actually part of that assembly. It would normally be on the main board, which this doesn't have. Keeping it locked is especially important because you don't want the drive to spin up while you're giving it a bit of pressure to try to open it. So I guess I'm going to show you a couple methods now to properly open your iPod. It's not entirely improper to do this, but there's better methods. So firstly, there's this weird thing that I got from a screen protector. You're supposed to use it to like push the bubbles out, but it's got this really nice wedge shape. So I've been using it for opening pods, and it goes pretty well because it pushes against multiple of the plastic locks at once. It's a pretty good tool for this. You just gotta push a little bit of pressure on the back of the case, slide it back and forth until it gets in. The next method would be the standard spudger. I broke all of my standard spudgers, so we're gonna have to do with this sharpened paintbrush. It's definitely sharp, so very similar to the other one. Put a little bit of pressure on the back of the case, put this into the crack, slide it back and forth until it works its way in. And this one you're gonna have to do a little more than the wide spudger. Push it back and forth a little bit until the case pops, and there you go. And for the last of the normal option, the classic guitar pick. This one's an actual guitar pick. I don't know how you... Oh yeah, Dunlop, you can see it. I mean, they work pretty good. The same as always, work it back and forth a little bit until you get it in, and then just slide it across. You don't need to have a pick like this. You can use an ordinary shaped one, but I find that a pick like this allows you to get a bit more leverage, and because it's wider, it's a lot less likely to buckle. Of course, you can just use any guitar pick. Now that you have your pod cracked open, it's time to I was using this for isolation. I didn't want to keep taking the rubber thing in it. Don't worry about that. The first things you're going to want to do are unplug this connector and the battery. The battery on this one's already unplugged because I'm using a 3rd gen battery in it. Don't worry about that. To help you unplug this top one, you'll want to have the hard drive removed so you have enough space to get at it. Unplug it like a little Lego. Pull straight up and it just comes out. After you've taken that out, you can just put the back to the side. Now, normally your battery cable is going to be under the motherboard. So to undo your battery, you're going to have to pull it and then completely remove this screw and loosen that screw by at least halfway so that you can lift up the motherboard and pull the battery cable out. If your battery's been in for a long time, it might be stuck to this glue still. So just be gentle, firm, and patient. Now there's a little lever right here that you're going to flip so that you can get the Clickwheel connector out when you remove the main board. Next you'll have to take out the 6 T6 screws that are holding the board in. 2 at the bottom here, 2 at the top, 1 here, and then 1 that's under this tape. Use a plastic push-a-majig to lift up the tape. Try not to bend the ribbon cable as much as possible, and the screw's just right there. You shouldn't really need a screwdriver to get these out. They shouldn't ever be more than finger tight. Also, interestingly, all the screws inside of the classic iPods are slightly magnetized, which is really convenient. Also, iPods come with a convenient screw tray. Now that you've got the screws out, you can flip this little lever here to loosen the display connector if you'd like, but it's not super necessary and it's kind of finicky to put back in. So sometimes it's better to save the effort. Just lift evenly and slowly, especially if you've left the display plugged in so that it just comes out nice and slowly. See that? See, it's all stayed plugged in, and then that, just pull it out. After you pull out Clickwheel ribbon, you can put the main board aside. As a couple of you said in the comments, there's actually this Lego connector on the back of the Clickwheel that you can just unplug so that you don't have to worry about damaging the ribbon when you're trying to remove the front plastic. All you have to do is get a nice thin tool, stick it underneath the lip, and just wiggle it side to side a little bit until it pops. And there you go, you can see that little Lego connector on both sides. Push it back down, it goes in. For getting the Clickwheel out, there's glue under basically this entire square of metal. So you have to start by getting something under it and prying it while pushing on the other side. It can help to sort of twist the case a little bit to lift up one of the corners. If you're less afraid like me, you're not going to use plastic tools. You're going to use the sharp, pointy. Always be very careful when you're using metal tools. They can really hurt you if you're not careful. So using something like this or a flathead screwdriver, push firmly but not super hard until it just starts to dig under. You can see it slipped out. Just starting to dig under. Wiggle it back. Oh, whoa. That's why you gotta be careful. That's why you don't use metal tools. Being careful, going to take the tool, get it just under, wiggle it a little bit. After you hear the first initial pop, you don't need to use a metal tool anymore. Hold it, stick your finger so it's holding it, and then go back to your plastic tool and just start pushing. And there you go. It should pop right off. If you've already unplugged this cable, as you should have, this piece just comes off cleanly. All you'll be left with is the raw Clickwheel sitting in the face. After you've gotten to this point, you can just follow my video from there, peeling off the plastic and all that jazz. Something important to consider is that you probably don't want to remove your Clickwheel more than you need to. Probably not more than once. The glue on this plate is used to make the Clickwheel feel really solid and secure, like it's part of the faceplate. So it's really important that you keep it clean so that when you put it back in, it goes back in and stays in and feels solid. Otherwise, when you're using it, it might push into the iPod and just feel mushy and very unresponsive. As for cleaning the Clickwheel, I looked into Goo Gone at the recommendation of some people in the r/iPod Discord server, and it's definitely the stuff I need, but it's a pretty harsh solvent that shouldn't be used without taking proper precautions. And as it stands right now, I don't really have the means to take those precautions. I don't have any good ventilation or any masks or anything like that that would keep me safe. The glue that they use on these wheels, it's very, very solvent resistant. I just have a piece of packing tape over it right now. I will be using Goo Gone on it at some point, when I have the means to do it safely. As for the future of the project, I got one of these Dremel machines, and over the next few days I'm going to be building a box to work and film in, just sort of to keep all the plastic dust and debris to a minimum. Once I have the box constructed, I have a good few projects planned that I think will take advantage of my new constructive capabilities. The box is going to end up having a couple windows made out of something like this, with places where I can mount my phone, so that you guys can actually watch me build stuff. So as long as the angles are good, the footage will be pretty good too. Anyways, that's about all I have for this addendum. I hope you guys like the format, and tell me what you think in the comments below. Should I continue the follow-up format, or should I diff it? Subscribe to keep up with this project, and future ones that I have planned. This is only the beginning. Good boy. Right. Get the ball. Good job, Remby. Good ball, Remy. Good job.